let's get Frank Seravalli in here. We didn't have him last week, so we're itching to get him back on today. I said
no one
Monday,
ever.
but it is Tuesday. No, see, Frank, we're two of the very few people that look forward to seeing you on our weekly, meeting on Morning Cup of Hockey. So we are on that list. It might not be long, but at least I am at the top of that list, Frank. So how are we this morning?
I'm good. How are you guys?
I'm concerned, Frank. I'm quite concerned.
You had like the midnight, very dark lit room panicked video.
I was outside on the roof. I was on the roof.
Johnny, New York Rangers fan, just absolutely melting down. I mean, dude, I don't know if you know this, but did you know the Rangers are still in a playoff spot?
Doesn't matter though. Like
it does.
Did you know that the Rangers are 12-7-1? Like, come on.
Rather than not be in a playoff spot right now.
Really?
The record just covers up all the mistakes and everything.
It doesn't cover it up. They know they have to make changes, but you'd rather have to make changes and be dealing from a position of strength instead of being 7-12 or
I'm
worse.
happier they lost last night than had they won, honestly. Because had they won, it's just another delay in the process.
So what's next? Are you going to be a Calgary Flames fan where you say, God, I hate that we're going to go out and acquire good players. Man, I wish we would lose.
I just think something needs to change. Like, I've seen it happen over and over and over again, and it's just not good enough. Good isn't good enough, and something has to happen.
So then let's ask the question, Johnny, because we
have Frank on here. He's the guest.
Let's ask Frank the question. Frank, the reports floating around out there about this person being available, that person being available. Give us the details. Is it true? Is it not true? Is this Drury? We know Drury's not a leaker. So if he's saying this stuff, is he just sending a message through the media to try to fire up his players? Like, break this situation down for us, if you would.
Yeah. So what I would say is it is accurate. I don't think it was emanating from the New York Rangers front office. And so my understanding of the context of it is that Chris Drury had, engaged with some other teams and in conversation, and where that goes from here, how serious it is, how likely it is that something happens or comes from it, we'll see. But I think the front office and the coaching staff are seeing, Johnny, a lot of what you're explaining or feeling.
They saw my video, you think, last night?
Probably not. No, I'm going to say no. But look, I think here's the thing that really kind of grabs me, and this is just a league-wide perspective. Because of the things we just talked about, the Rangers are 12-7-1. Because they've had playoff success and have sort of been knocking on that door of a Stanley Cup, if the New York Rangers are considering shaking it up, what are the Ottawa Senators doing? What are the Buffalo Sabres doing? What are the Detroit Red Wings doing? What are the Nashville Predators doing? Or pick another team, the Anaheim Ducks. If you've got one of the best teams in the league over the last handful of years willing to change out pieces of their core, why is everyone else sitting on their hands?
Well, I think to that point, the teams you just named, like Ottawa, Anaheim, I think you say Buffalo, like those teams to me, and granted, Buffalo, I know it's been like 13, 14 years since they made the playoffs, but those windows are just now like opening where they were in that rebuild. And for the Rangers, it feels like that window is so close to shutting. Like, this team's been competitive for the past couple years, and the guys just continue to get older.
I totally disagree with that.
Why is that?
And I'll take you back to the Jacob Trouba comments from before the season started, when he basically said, hey, this is, potentially our last, I'm paraphrasing, last kick at the can for this core. And all I could think to myself was, no, this is potentially your last kick at the can. I don't know about you, but I don't look at the Rangers and say this is an incredibly old team.
Well, it's not even just that, Frank. It's because Panarin has 1 year left on his deal. Igor after this year unsigned. Like, there's a lot of unknown coming up around the corner.
Yeah, I mean, if you're scared, get a dog. Like that. Like, come on. Like, it's
realistic though. It's realistic. Like, those guys might not be here.
Is it? Like, I think it's still really likely that Shesterkin is here. And if they want to re-sign Panarin, he obviously likes it there. So what about the rest of the group? Like, yeah, I mean, Zibanejad is signed long-term. Kreider, he's got a couple years left if he's still here. Trocheck has been one of the best values in the game the last while, and he's got term. And then you talk about the other young guys that have taken a step so far this year. Alexis Lafreniere, re-signed. Philip Hedl, injury history or question marks. Sure, he's got a couple years on his deal. Fox, right in the absolute heart and prime of his career. It's overblown, Johnny. Like this idea that this whole thing is going to get blown up. Could one piece be subbed out for another? Could maybe two, potentially. Mm-hmm. But to think that this team is going to drastically change shape or form, I think is probably really unlikely. I think what we're talking about here is a potential jolt, a shakeup.
Well, I thought it was honestly just a bluff, like the report yesterday. I actually didn't think there was. Colby, you're muted, by the way.
You had one job.
I just thought it was like a little kick in the ass for noise to creep in and like basically have the team feel like nobody's safe. But if you're saying like they're really shopping these guys around, like I'm kind of all for it.
Well, let me just hold on. I want to address the chat here. Hockey Sense is saying watch every game, Frank. Well, look, just because Trocheck might have it might be in a stretch of games right now where he hasn't been as good. Look at the larger body of work. Like what people need to understand.
Look at Kreider's larger body of work.
Like, directly to you, Hockey Sense, is management and coaches. They don't look at a 5-game stretch when a player has hundreds of games of record, right? It's like a banking system. You put X amount of dollars in. Well, now you have equity built, right? You have credit built. So Trocheck has been one of the best value contracts since he signed it with the New York Rangers, 100%. Just because he's had a very small stretch where he hasn't been as good. We're not going to sit here and say, oh, you don't watch the Rangers or you don't know what you're talking about. No, you're telling me you don't know what you're talking about with that type of comment.
He was their best player in the playoffs last year by far.
Yes. Are you kidding me? Last year, 25 goals and 77 points, playing 21 and a half minutes a night, making 5.625, like absolute bargain.
Who's probably going to find his way onto the Team USA roster? Probably.
Well, we can talk about that because Johnny, I took Kreider off last week.
And I agree.
And I left Trocheck on, though, by virtue of his versatility.
Yeah, and Frank, in no world should Kreider be on a team that Tage Thompson is not, in my opinion. I mean, Tage is a much better overall complete player. He is. Like, you can argue that Kreider's the best net front presence in the power play in the league. But,
I was going to say that's the really hard part, was getting rid of the net front presence. But once you can live with that and assume that this team is going to score tons of goals anyway, then I think you're fine.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Did you want to touch on that more on the USA roster?
No, I don't want to go there with Frank because I have other things that I want to ask him about, not about the New York Rangers. And look, we've now talked about Jim Montgomery a lot, and like this will be the last day I think we talk about this. But one question that I have for you, Frank, and I saw the comments from Don Sweeney about how they couldn't come to a contract agreement when they were trying to extend Jim Montgomery. And like, I'm wondering, had they agreed on a contract, would they have not fired him? Like, that confused me because I felt like Sweeney was sort of throwing himself a little bit of a life raft on why he did it by saying, well, we couldn't come up with an extension. But if you were just going to fire the guy, why would you have given him an extension? Like, that bothered me. And I just felt like that was a little bit of a cop out, quote, conversation piece and talking point.
I would tend to agree. You don't get to say that after you gas the guy, but I think in general, though, part of the reason why we arrived at that point last week was that it was more or less shit or get off the pot. You're either extending this guy and you're saying, hey, this is our coach and we are locked in with him for the next number of years. Players get used to it. Everyone get in line. Or you're making the coaching change, because to allow it to continue to linger on with subpar play, with an associate coach there in Joe Sacco that you obviously trust in Boston, that allowing this whole situation to kind of continue to fester, I think was no good for anyone. And that's part of the reason why they made the change. It was either extend him or fire him. To sit here and continue to go through the season with a lame duck coach that you're not bringing back anyway, what's the point?
When is Mike Sullivan's contract up with Pittsburgh?
No, not for a while.
Not for a while.
Got a big extension.
Yeah, his extension actually took a long time to kick in. So I think it was a 5-year extension, if I'm not mistaken, that vaulted him into the top 2 or 3 highest paid coaches in the league.
I know his name is going to keep coming up, obviously, if Pittsburgh continues to struggle. But like the day that Mike Sullivan eventually does get fired, do you think it takes less days for him to get rehired than it does Jim Montgomery? Because I feel like someone will snatch him up the next day.
Well, is Joe Sacco still the interim when this all happens?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Is that what you think that it's right to Boston?
Yeah, I absolutely think they're going to keep that interim tag on him as long as they can, just to give themselves the option to get Mike Sullivan.
Did you play for Joe Sacco?
I did, and I really liked him. And I think he's going to do a good job. I think that, look, Joe Sacco's turned down a head coaching job in the NHL in the last 5 years because he didn't like the situation. And so the guy was ready for another chance. Like he knows what he's doing. But look, Mike Sullivan, it would be hard to walk away from that if you're the Boston Bruins.
Hey, the Bruins have had pretty good success with taking guys that have had some time between NHL head coaching gigs.
Absolutely,
and
good point.
Giving them another opportunity. Bruce Cassidy being the latest one. He was with the Caps like literally forever ago.
Yeah.
And then was in the AHL for
when
a long
Yager
time.
And Mike Greer were still playing hockey, he was the coach of the Caps.
Wow.
Yeah, and then, Joe Sacco, it's been 11 years, 12 years since he last had an NHL head coaching. Mike Sullivan went forever too. And Mike Sullivan, if I'm not mistaken, was in Boston previously.
He had a
New York
coaching
he
job.
Was Torts' assistant in New York.
He was an assist after he got fired in Boston. He was Torts' assistant for years. Not just New York, Vancouver. And then eventually, and I remember Mike Sullivan actually told me this at Jack Parker's retirement. Torts said to him, "You've got to go somewhere else. Like if you keep staying with me, you're gonna, and they had to they're great friends."
I would shit my pants playing for those two guys. They're so intimidating, those two guys.
Both of them on the same bench. Imagine that.
I would shit my pants.
I think the Pittsburgh situation is a little bit more. Look, I've been in this camp the whole time saying Mike Sullivan is so wired in with Fenway Sports Group. And basically, if you go back to the Ron Hextall tenure, he actually more or less negotiated his deal directly with Fenway that went over the head of the general manager at the time, which I think caused a lot of consternation. Now, Kyle Dubas comes in. He's got a long-term deal of his own. I don't think anyone would possibly say that things are working out. And Mike Sullivan appears as frustrated as anyone. Watching the Penguins game on Friday night against the Jets, Kevin Sawyer from the Jets broadcast was between the benches. And he actually mentioned on air how incredibly awkward it was just being around that scene, because he said Sullivan didn't speak for entire periods, just on the bench staring daggers at players.
Jeez.
I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means in the overall, scope or scheme of what the Penguins are doing or not doing. But I think Mike Sullivan is an incredible coach. I think he's easily top 3, top 5 in the entire NHL in terms of preparation, ability, presence, all those key things that you look for in a head coach. But I also think, even with some of the things that I talked about and how wired in he is with Fenway Sports Group, that sometimes it's time.
Yeah.
I don't think we're that far. I really don't think we're that far away from it.
Listen, I always use the Andy Reid analogy. Andy Reid wasn't fired because he's a bad coach for the Eagles. Look at what he's done in Kansas City. It was too long. Like his tenure, the time was just up. And that's where I think we're getting to with Mike Sullivan. And just to verify your point, Johnny, Mike Sullivan is an extremely nice guy. like extremely, right? I played golf with him one time at the BU golf, alumni golf outing.
God,
and I got to tell you, nicest guy ever, but also probably the most intimidating person I've ever been around in the game of hockey. Just when he shakes your hand and his voice goes 17 octaves below sea level, you're like, whoa, like this guy is a lot.
He's not even the most intimidating coach in the Eastern Conference.
Who would you say is?
Craig Berube, and it's not close.
Yeah, but Craig Berube is such a light, I disagree in my interactions with him, and he's such a light, fun guy to be around.
Clearly never been on the wrong end of a Craig Berube.
Well, I have not. You're right. I've never been tongue lashed by him.
But one thing I wanted to add about the silence on the bench, and Colby, I don't know if you've ever had this experience in your hockey career, but I've had like one or two coaches that when we're not playing well over a stretch of games, they'll say, fuck it, you don't want to listen to me, go coach yourselves. And then they literally won't speak. Like that's happened like twice, I think, in my playing career.
Carvey do that at all?
No, don't make him name names. Come on, that's not.
I'm not gonna name names. Carb did not do that, but Carb actually did once. I think he got off in the middle of practice, and we were just like, "Do we get off? Like, what do we do? Like, what do we do?" Like, he was so pissed at us. He just got off the ice, and everyone was like, "What are we supposed to do?" Like, it was a really uncomfortable day at the rink for sure. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if that happened. I'm not going to speculate that's what happened, but I've had that happen to me in my career for sure, where coach is like, you don't want to listen to me? Fuck it, coach yourselves. I doubt that would happen at the NHL level, but I don't know.
Maybe it is. Maybe he's looking at some of these vets saying, okay, you guys don't need our help. Yeah. That's fine.
Frank, there's one team I want to ask you about. And I don't mean to put you on the hot seat here or anything, but when it comes to trades, I feel like in the beginning of the year, a team we were all looking at is the Calgary Flames. Like they're a team that probably should make moves for the future. And, a guy that I'm wondering about, obviously now with all this Ranger speculation, a guy that I'm looking at closely who could help this team is a guy like Nazem Kadri, but he's got a lot of term left on his deal at $7 million per. Is he a guy that you could see being on the move this year, or is that not even up for debate?
I mean, it's possible. I think it's really unlikely. I think the term on the contract is really a limiting force. That said, I also can tell you that the Calgary Flames they're not in a posture where they want to move players. And they're really happy with what they've gotten from their team so far. Everyone that I talk to says it has been night and day different with that team from this year to last.
Are they not this year's Flyers? Because that's what it feels like.
No, I think they are. I think they are the Kraken from a couple years ago.
Okay. Yeah, because they have more pieces than the Flyers, Johnny. Going through their roster, they have more pieces than the Flyers last year.
Yeah, but I think what's tying this group together is two things. One, they have an us against the world mentality. No one picked that team to make the playoffs this year. They saw all of it. They said, hey, we think we're better than we've been given credit for. And two, they got rid of all the guys who didn't want to be there anymore. Think about last year's roster at the start of the year compared to this one. No Lindholm, no Zadorov, no Markstrom. Go through the entire group. It's a big change, and they lost a lot of pieces. But what they do have there is a group that wants to play there. And that is a key difference. Just talking to people in their front office, man, I was afraid to go near our locker room even after wins last year because it was so quiet. This year, the environment, the vibe, totally different. And I'll tell you what, this is not a hot take. Mm-hmm. But if they continue to get goaltending anywhere near this neighborhood, they're making the playoffs. And I'm going to guarantee you that.
Steak dinner?
Yes. Look, Wolf and Vladar have been lights out. And the craziest part about that is in the minors, Cooley has been even better. And they're in a spot now. They've gone 17 consecutive games, I think last night. I just blanking on last night's score, but they've gone 17 consecutive games without getting more than 3 goals scored in regulation.
They looked like the Russian Red Army team against the Rangers on
last night was 18 in a row.
Well, they're
18 in a row without getting more than 3 goals.
And they're also getting a little bit of like depth scoring, like Connor Zary scoring goals, Matt Coronado.
Dude, he's not depth scoring.
Well,
Connor Zary is a star in the making. Telling you right now,
and he is playing in a top line. So okay, I'll stand corrected on calling him depth scoring, but he doesn't have a massive body of work, and he's continuing to contribute. So.
Colby loves the body of work.
Dude, Connor Zary is going to be a 60 to 65 point scorer this year.
Okay, well then you've seen him more than I have, but like Matt Coronado, again, like you're getting, you have this like extra little push. You have him up on your second line.
Coronado's driving play, dude.
Matt Sullivan doesn't have a large body of work.
This is their young group of players. This is their young group of players that are
just because you look like a penis today, you have to act like one.
Jesus.
I mean, like he's just I don't know why we're talking about the Calgary Flames, and now you're
because you always talk about a player's body of work, dude.
He just threw a total non sequitur into the chat
because I got him.
Well, what does that have to do with anything, though?
It doesn't. He just literally is like diarrhea mouth this morning. You should have heard him in the pre-show meeting. We had to put him in the corner because he was acting.
He's rattled about the Rangers. He's trying to keep his head on straight.
I'm honestly pretty happy about it.
For whatever reason, Johnny is a closeted Devils fan when the Devils are doing well, and a closeted Islanders fan when the Islanders are doing well. So like right now,
just remember, Johnny, when you hit 40, you will still have to go for your prostate exam.
What is that? See, that's what does that have to do with
Think about it.
All right, Frank, it's 9:50. We got to say goodbye to you. This is going off the rails pretty quickly. Last question I'm going to ask you, Frank. Who's the next coach of the National Hockey League to go?
I think Sullivan's in that category.
Right
I think
your phone.
I think there's a group of guys that are the next candidates. It's Sullivan, Cronin, and Derek Lalonde.
Oh, well, it's got to be Lalonde, right? It's got to be.
I hope we see Joel Quenneville in Detroit. I think that would be really interesting to see with the Yzer plan. Or
I thought Jim Montgomery would have been really a good fit for Anaheim too.
With all those studs, he would have got those guys playing fast.
I just think he's a good teacher and good developer. Yeah. I think he's better at that than he gets credit for, and I think he might even be better at that than being an actual win in the playoffs coach.
Well, look what he did. He was phenomenal developing talent at Denver. He took that team back to the national championship, which sort of reignited that run. And Denver's has more national championships now than anybody. His career, most of his pro career was in the American League, right? Like, he did play some games in the National Hockey League, a nice little chunk, but he spent a lot of time in the development aspect of hockey. So. I think the world of Monty. So I think he's going to be successful in wherever he goes. But anyways, Frank, we appreciate your time today. Noon Eastern, Daily Faceoff Live. You and Tyler Yaremchuk today. Other than that, we appreciate your time as always, Frank.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Seravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.